Enjoy the show, darling. I placed the black envelope on the coffee table, right between the half-empty wine glasses and scattered poker chips. The laughter died instantly. 14 pairs of eyes fixed on me, some wide with shock, others narrowed in confusion, and one pair, my wife's, darkening with dawning horror. Tessa's face drained of color as she rose from the lap of a man I recognized as her colleague, Jason. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The room smelled of wine, perfume, and secrets, the same cologne I'd been noticing on our sheets for months. "Mark," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're supposed to be at work." I didn't answer. There was no need. I simply nodded toward the envelope and walked out, closing our front door with a soft click behind me. No shouting, no scene, just surgical precision, the same way I handled trauma in the ER. My name is Mark Patterson. I'm 38 years old, an emergency room nurse at Mercy General. I've spent 12 years stabilizing car crash victims, pumping overdosed teenagers' stomachs, and holding the hands of the dying when their families couldn't make it in time. I know how to stay calm when everything is falling apart. I know how to function while bleeding inside. Tonight, I finally used those skills at home. 3 months ago, I wasn't looking for evidence. I was just tired. Bone-deep, mind-numbing exhaustion after a 16-hour shift that had included a 5-car pileup on the interstate. 3 casualties, 1 DOA. I'd had blood on my scrubs, in my hair, under my fingernails. All I wanted was shower and sleep. Instead, I found messages on Tessa's unlocked phone when it buzzed on our kitchen counter. I wasn't snooping. I was going to bring it upstairs to her. But the preview notification caught my eye. From Jason. "Still taste you on my lips. Can't wait till Nurse Boy pulls another double." I stood there for what felt like hours, my body completely still while my world tilted sideways. I scrolled up. More messages, pictures, videos, a 6-month history of betrayal, right there in my hands. Upstairs, I could hear Tessa humming in the shower. The same shower we'd remodeled together last year, with the rainfall showerhead she'd wanted and the bench seat I'd installed by hand. The same shower where, apparently, she'd taken explicit photos to send to her lover while I worked overtime to pay for our mortgage. I placed the phone back exactly as I'd found it and went to the guest bedroom. I didn't confront her. Not then. Because something cold and clear crystallized inside me. If I was going to lose everything, I'd do it on my terms. It took me 2 weeks to process what was happening. I thought about the signs I'd missed, or perhaps ignored. Tessa's wine nights that left our house smelling like strangers. The way she'd stopped asking about my day. How she'd been too tired or not in the mood for months. Yet somehow always looked radiant, perfumed, and eager on evenings when I was scheduled to work. "You're never home anyway," she'd complained last month when I asked why she'd spent $400 on new lingerie I'd never seen her wear. "Why not let me have some fun?" Fun, dot. That's what she called it. The breaking point came when I finished a shift early and overheard her on the phone in our bedroom. "He's so exhausted I could throw a threesome in our bed and he'd just think it was a dream," she giggled to someone. "No, seriously, Mark's completely oblivious. It's almost sad." I stood in the hallway, my hospital bag still slung over my shoulder, as she continued. "Anyway, Jason's bringing that hot resident from cardiology next weekend. Mark's pulling a double shift Saturday, so we'll have the whole house. Bring that bottle of tequila you promised." That night, as Tessa slept beside me, I made a decision. I wouldn't become the raging, betrayed husband. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of my pain. Instead, I would become something much more dangerous. Patient. The first surveillance camera went into the air vent above our bed. The second, behind the decorative mirror in the guest bathroom. 3 more throughout the house. Living room, kitchen, back patio. Small, wireless, motion-activated, and feeding into encrypted cloud storage only I could access. The audio recorders were even smaller, one in the potted fern by the couch, another in the decorative bowl on the dining table, a third attached to the underside of her vanity. I spent $2,800 on the equipment. Money well spent. I told Tessa I was picking up extra shifts because a colleague needed time off for a family emergency. In reality, I spent those hours in a coffee shop 6 blocks away, watching the live stream from our home, cataloging every betrayal, every lie, every mockery of our 11-year marriage. The first weekend yielded exactly what I expected. Jason arrived with wine and wandering hands. They didn't even make it upstairs before clothes started coming off. On our couch, where we'd watched movies together, where I'd held her during her father's funeral. I watched, not with rage, but with clinical detachment. Each kiss, each moan, each disrespectful comment about nurse boy was evidence, ammunition. I documented everything, timestamps, identities of visitors, conversations. God, doesn't Mark ever notice these weekends? One of her friends asked during a particularly crowded gathering. Tessa laughed, refilling wine glasses. Mark notices about as much as a houseplant. He works so much that when he's home, he's practically comatose. It's the perfect arrangement. Aren't you worried, though? Another woman, I recognized her as Jamie from Tessa's office, looked concerned. What if he finds out? What's he going to do? Tessa shrugged. Cry about it? Mark's too nice for his own good. Besides, the house is in both our names, and California's a community property state. Worst case scenario, I get half of everything in maintenance payments. I've been putting money aside. That was news to me. I checked our accounts that night and discovered she'd been siphoning funds into a private account for months, nearly $40,000 from our joint savings. Money I'd earned during overnight shifts and holiday rotations. Money meant for our future. The next day, I consulted a divorce attorney. Sharon Lichtman was recommended by a colleague who'd gone through a similar situation. She was expensive, ruthless, and worth every penny. Infidelity alone won't help much in California, she explained. But financial infidelity, hiding assets, unauthorized withdrawals from joint accounts, that's different. And if you can prove she's using your marital home to conduct these affairs while you're working to support the household, we can make a case for spousal misconduct. Add the surveillance evidence. Is that legal? I interrupted. Sharon pursed her lips. You live in the home. You installed devices in common areas. There's no expectation of privacy in your living room or kitchen. The bedroom is trickier, but we can argue you had reasonable suspicion of misconduct in your own marital bed. The bigger question is, do you want to play nice, or do you want to win? I thought about Tessa laughing with her lover about my obliviousness, about the money she'd stolen, about 11 years of my life. I want to win, I said quietly. 5 years ago, Tessa and I took a trip to Maui for our anniversary. We hiked to a waterfall, and I remember how she looked standing under it, laughing, radiant, alive. She'd grabbed my hands and pulled me under the cascading water with her. This is how I want to feel forever, she'd whispered against my lips. Like everything in the world is beautiful and possible. I proposed the next day on a sunset cruise. She cried when I gave her the ring. I thought they were tears of joy. Now I wonder if she was already weighing its resale value. There were other memories, too. Building our first apartment's IKEA furniture together, nursing each other through food poisoning after a questionable food truck experience, the way she'd bring me coffee during my study sessions when I was getting my BSN degree. Had it all been a performance? Or had something changed along the way? I found myself analyzing our relationship like a patient chart, looking for the moment the vital signs began to fail. Maybe it was 3 years ago, when I took the night shift permanently for the pay differential. Maybe it was when she got promoted at her PR firm and suddenly had a new circle of friends, wealthier, sleeker, impressed by status and hungry for drama. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe Tessa just got bored and I was too exhausted to notice. Either way, I couldn't afford to dwell on the past. I had preparations to make. Over the next 2 months, I moved methodically. First, I documented the missing money and opened new accounts at a different bank. Then I gradually moved my direct deposits and the remaining joint funds, leaving just enough to avoid suspicion. I changed my beneficiary information on my life insurance and 401k. I found a furnished condo across town and signed a 6-month lease, paying in advance. I had our household valuables, those with sentimental value to me, quietly appraised and photographed for the divorce proceedings. I backed up all the surveillance footage to multiple secure locations, and I watched as Tessa's betrayal escalated. What had started as weekend trysts with Jason evolved into something more brazen. She began using our home for larger gatherings, parties while I worked night shifts, sometimes with 4 or 5 couples, drinking, using recreational drugs, and eventually pairing off in various rooms of our house. And Tessa was the ringleader. "Mark's so sweet," she told a newcomer at one of these events, her words slightly slurred. "He has no idea how to handle a woman like me. Too gentle, too boring. But he makes good money and he's never home to bother me, so it works out." The newcomer, a man with a wedding ring of his own, laughed. "And he never suspects?" "Mark?" Tessa snorted. "He's practically a robot. All he cares about is his patients and his sleep schedule. I could leave lipstick on his collar and he'd just think it was blood from the hospital." They all laughed, all except Jamie, who looked increasingly uncomfortable as the weeks went on. Then I discovered something worse. On a Tuesday afternoon, while Tessa thought I was sleeping between shifts, she brought Jason to our house. They went into my home office where I kept important documents. "Are you sure about this?" Jason asked as Tessa rummaged through my files. "Relax. Mark never checks these. I've been signing his name on credit applications for years," Tessa replied, pulling out our property deed. "We just need to get this refinanced before I file for divorce. The house has appreciated almost $200,000 since we bought it. We can use the equity to get that place in Palm Springs we talked about." "What about the mortgage payments?" Jason sounded nervous. "Mark will have to keep making them until the divorce is final. By then, we'll have the cash in hand." She kissed him. "Trust me, I've got it all planned out." That night, I provided Sharon with the new footage. She smiled grimly. Forgery, attempted fraud, conspiracy. "Now we're talking," she said, making notes. "When do you want to execute?" I checked my calendar. "I have a 16-hour shift scheduled for the 28th. She's already planning another gathering. That's when we do it." The day arrived with a strange sense of calm. I packed a bag as if leaving for work, kissed an unconcerned Tessa goodbye, and drove to the hospital. I clocked in, explained to my supervisor that a family emergency had come up, and used a personal day. She was sympathetic. I'd never taken time off without good reason before. I spent the day at Sharon's office, finalizing paperwork and reviewing our strategy. At 9:30 p.m., I drove home and parked a block away. Through my phone, I watched Tessa's party reach full swing. 12 people, including Jason and several other regular visitors. Music, dancing, cocaine on my coffee table. At 10:15 p.m., I texted Jamie. "I know what's happening at my house. I'm coming home. You might want to leave." 3 minutes later, Jamie made an excuse and left the party. Good for her. She was the only one who'd shown any hesitation about the whole situation. The rest deserved what was coming. At 10:30 p.m., I walked into my own home without knocking. The shock on their faces was immediate. Several people I barely recognized froze mid-conversation. One couple scrambled to adjust clothing. Jason's arm, which had been around Tessa's waist, dropped to his side. Tessa recovered first, plastering on a smile. "Mark, you're home early. We're just having a little get-together with—" I placed the black envelope on the table and said the only 4 words I'd planned. "Enjoy the show, darling." Then I left. In the envelope, dozens of high-resolution screenshots from my surveillance footage. Tessa and Jason in our bed. Tessa discussing how to defraud me with the house refinancing. Tessa mocking me to her friends. Tessa with the various men she'd brought into our home. Tessa snorting cocaine off our wedding photo album. And a note that simply read, "The rest goes to your boss, your parents, and your church tomorrow, unless you're out of the house by noon. The divorce papers are being served in the morning. I drove to my new condo and slept better than I had in years." The fallout was swift and comprehensive. Tessa called 17 times that night. I didn't answer. Her texts ranged from raging, "You fucking spied on me?" to desperate, "We need to talk, I can explain everything," to threatening, "You can't prove anything, I'll tell everyone you abused me." I forwarded the threats to Sharon, who added them to our file. The divorce papers were served at 8 a.m. by a process server who reported that Tessa looked like she hadn't slept and might be under the influence. Included was a restraining order preventing her from accessing our joint assets or entering the property after noon, based on evidence of financial fraud and her documented threats. By 11:30 a.m., according to my remaining cameras, Tessa was frantically packing suitcases, alternating between crying and screaming at Jason on the phone. He wasn't answering either. At 11:58, she left with 3 suitcases and a box of personal items, slamming the door behind her. I had the locks changed at 1 p.m. At 2 p.m., carefully curated selections of the surveillance footage were delivered to 3 recipients. Martin Geller, CEO of Pinnacle PR, where Tessa worked as a reputation management director. The package focused on her cocaine use, her discussions of using company time for her affairs, and her detailed plans to defraud me. Not ideal qualities for someone managing client reputations. Pastor Richard Simmons at Lakeside Community Church, where Tessa led the women's ministry and marriage preparation classes. His package included footage of Tessa mocking the desperate virgins in her program and using our home for what amounted to swinger parties. Vivian and Raymond Price, Tessa's parents, who had welcomed me into their family and who believed their daughter was in a loving, committed marriage. They received only a single video, Tessa explaining to a friend that she'd never loved me but had married me because I was stable, employable, and easy to manage. By Monday morning, Tessa was unemployed. Pinnacle PR couldn't afford the liability of an executive with documented ethical violations. By Wednesday, she'd been asked to step down from all church activities. By the following weekend, according to mutual friends, her parents had refused to let her stay with them, horrified by what they'd learned. Jason, it turned out, was also married. His wife received her own package. He moved out of state within a month. The divorce proceedings were remarkably straightforward. With evidence of financial misconduct, attempt to defraud, and misuse of marital assets, Tessa's claims fell apart. There was no alimony. The house remained mine. The retirement accounts remained untouched. She was even ordered to repay the money she'd taken from our joint accounts. I heard through mutual connections that she ended up moving to her sister's place in Nevada, waitressing at a casino and telling anyone who would listen that I was a controlling psychopath who had driven her to cheat. Few believed her. The evidence was too clear, too damning, too comprehensive. I never spoke to her again. It's been 18 months since that night. My new life has taken shape gradually, like a Polaroid developing. The house sold quickly, and I used the proceeds to buy a smaller place closer to the hospital. No sense in commuting when you work the hours I do. I switched to the day shift finally, watching sunrises instead of missing them. I adopted a retired greyhound named Miles, who doesn't care about my schedule as long as he gets his walks and his spot on the couch. Sometimes, I think about who I was before. The trusting husband who worked himself to exhaustion while his wife made a mockery of their marriage. Other times, I think about who I became, the silent watcher, meticulously documenting betrayal from the shadows. Neither version seems quite right anymore. Last week, I had coffee with Jamie, of all people. She reached out through a mutual friend, wanting to apologize for her part in the situation. however peripheral. She didn't try to defend Tessa or minimize what had happened. She just said she wished she'd had the courage to tell me herself. "I was impressed by how you handled it," she admitted. "No screaming, no violence, just consequences." "The ER teaches you to respond, not react," I said. "Emotions cloud judgment." Still, it was, I don't know, dignified, I guess. We talked about other things after that. Her new job, my new dog, the book she's writing, the night shift finally being behind me. It was nice, normal in a way my life hadn't felt in years. As for Tessa, I heard she tried to re-establish herself in PR in Nevada, but the industry is small and reputations matter. Last I heard, she was still waitressing, living paycheck to paycheck in her sister's spare room. Jason apparently lost his medical license after his own misconduct came to light through the divorce proceedings with his wife. They deserved each other, really. Do I regret how things played out? Sometimes I regret that it was necessary. I regret the years wasted with someone who saw me as nothing but a convenience. I regret not seeing the truth sooner. But the quiet victory of reclaiming my life, the peace of a home that's truly mine, the knowledge that justice was served through truth rather than violence or drama, number. Those things I don't regret at all. Sometimes the silent ones hit the hardest. Sometimes watching and waiting yields the most complete victory. Sometimes the most devastating weapon isn't shouting or fighting, it's simply revealing the truth, without embellishment or emotional clouding. "Enjoy the show, darling," I told her that night. And in the end, it was quite a show indeed. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.